Hey Planeswalkers, this is Eric from Bane Alley Magic bringing you another deck tech slash gameplay video, and today we're talking about the age-old Archangel Avacyn slash Avacyn the Purifier deck that I've built several times. You might have noticed I've made multiple videos constantly upgrading this deck, and today we're finally going to play it in a competitive game. We're going to try to see how Boros can do in CEDH. That's right. So I've built a CEDH version of this deck, so let's talk about it. So Archangel Avacyn, 5 mana, 3 and 2 white for a 4/4. She has Flash, Flying, and Vigilance. When she enters the battlefield, our creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. And when a non-angel creature we control dies, we transform her into Avacyn the Purifier, a 6/5 with flying, and when it transforms into Avacyn the Purifier, it deals 3 damage to each other creature and each opponent. Now, the second side is honestly a side that I almost never, ever see happen. I almost never flip her. That's not the point of this deck. The point of this deck is the first side, just making all of our creatures indestructible. That's it. It is a high price to pay for that. Unfortunately, that's 5 mana just to make all of our creatures indestructible until the end of the turn. But that is part of the combo. So that's why it does work. It's an expensive commander, but, you know, we get enough mana out, we make the combo happen, it suddenly doesn't matter because all of our deck relies on the combo. So the combo is using one of our Brash Taunter type creatures. So Brash Taunter is the newest version of this card. 4 and a red for a 1/1 goblin with indestructible. When it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent, and you can pay 2 and a red and tap it to have it fight another target creature. And so this goes infinite, actually all by itself, 2-card combo with Guilty Conscience, which is 1 white for an enchantment aura. Whenever enchanted creature deals damage, Guilty Conscience deals that much damage to that creature. So Brash Taunter, it deals damage to a creature or an opponent. Doesn't matter if you attack with it. Doesn't matter if it gets blocked or not. If it's dealt damage or it deals damage, then the combo goes off. So let's say it didn't go blocked. It just dealt damage to the opponent. Deals 1 damage to the opponent. Guilty Conscience is going to deal 1 damage to it. It's going to deal 1 damage to then to the opponent, and then Guilty Conscience is going to deal 1 damage to it, and it's never going to die because it's indestructible. Now we have several other creatures that we can do this combo with, but we need Archangel Avacyn to make them indestructible. So Spite Mare, 2 and 2 hybrid red-white for a 3/3. Whenever it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target. Boros Reckoner, same exact thing, basically. 3 hybrid red-white for a 3/3 Minotaur Wizard. Whenever it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target. You can also pay 1 hybrid red-white to give it first strike until the end of the turn. We also got Frilled Deathspitter, 2 and a red for a 3/2 Dinosaur with Enrage. Whenever it's dealt damage, it deals 2 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. And the classic Mog Maniac, 1 and a red for a 1/1. Whenever it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent or planeswalker. You might recognize this. It is the logo for Bane Alley Magic. And then one more, actually, Spiteful Sliver, 2 and a red for a 2/2 Sliver. Whenever it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target player or planeswalker. So any of these go infinite with Guilty Conscience and Archangel Avacyn, making them indestructible. But you have to either deal them damage or have them deal damage. Now, I do have to give a shout out to subscriber Rombo Dazzle for pointing out that there is one more way we can pull off Guilty Conscience without having Guilty Conscience. The thing about Guilty Conscience is there's only one card like this that does this exact thing. But Rombo Dazzle has pointed out that if you combine the cards Pariah and Justice, you get the same effect. So that's pretty sweet. I want to give props to Rombo Dazzle for pointing that out. That's really cool. Unfortunately, the card Justice isn't available on Magic Online, so we couldn't use that. But there are replacements for it. Repercussion is basically going to work the same as Justice, but it's also gonna kind of kill us if we try to combo off any other way. So I didn't include any of those combos. You know, they're gonna take up multiple slots. Unlike Guilty Conscience, they're multiple cards. You know, Guilty Conscience is just one card. Another combo that also goes infinite with Archangel Avacyn. So that combo is Arc Bond, getting copied with Reverberate, and then also giving one of our creatures lifelink, so we use Swift Justice. So Arc Bond, 2 and a red, for an instant, choose target creature. Whenever that creature is dealt damage this turn, it deals that much damage to each other creature and each player. So, Reverberate, 2 red, copy target instant or sorcery spell. You can choose new target. We do really need to target 2 different indestructible creatures with Arc Bond for this to work, so sorry. So what you do is you cast Arc Bond on one of your creatures. You need at least 2 of your creatures. And then you cast Reverberate so that you cast Arc Bond on a second one of your creatures. And then you throw down Archangel Avacyn so that they're indestructible. And then you just got to deal one of them damage somehow. So we have a couple ways to deal random things damage in the deck. But mostly this is all instant speed stuff, so ideally you want to be doing this as a combat trick in response to blocking, right? You want to wait till someone's attacking you, and then you do this so that you're able to deal a creature damage. So anyway, you make your creatures indestructible, you have at least 2 of them with Arc Bond that you've copied with Reverberate, and then they just deal each other damage over and over again until everyone at the table is completely dead. Now, you just win the game right here if you're at the highest life total. If not, then you use Swift Justice to give one of them lifelink, and then you just win. And so that's the second combo of the deck. And so let's look at ways that we can support this combo. So of course, with any commander deck, we got lots of lands, and I'm not going to go over them all because that's super boring, but let's just go over the important utility lands. All right, so we got Slayer Stronghold, taps to add colorless, or you can pay red and a white and tap it to give target creature +2/+0 and haste and vigilance until end of turn. So the important word here is haste. We want to be able to give our creature haste so we can just attack right away and get the combo to go off right away without having some other card to try to deal it damage. Flamekin Village. As it enters the battlefield, you may reveal an elemental card from your hand. If you do, it enters the battlefield untapped. In fact, we do have one elemental in the deck, and it is Spite-Mare. So if you happen to have Spite-Mare in your hand, then this can enter untapped, but most of the time this will enter untapped. It taps to add a red, or you can pay a red and tap it, give target creature haste. And then I thought we had one more thing to give creatures. Oh yeah, Hall of the Bandit Lord. Enters tapped. You can tap it, pay 3 life, and add a colorless. If that mana is spent on a creature spell, it gains haste. So that 3 life is a little steep. So normally I'll play every other land I have before playing this one, if I have the opportunity. You just save this till the very end when you can give your creature haste. But we really don't mind losing life in this deck. We don't care if we're all the way down to like 1 life, you know, as long as we win with the combo, it doesn't matter. So all the time we're really low on life, and we still don't scoop because it doesn't matter. For drawing cards, we have Arc of Erazka. If you have the City's Blessing, you can pay 5 and tap it to draw a card. It also taps for colorless. High Market is in here to just sacrifice a creature in case someone's trying to enchant one of our creatures, or exile one of our creatures, or make copies of our creatures, or gain control of our creatures, or whatever. Ghost Quarter is in here to deal with nasty lands. Zhalfirin Void, when it enters the battlefield, you get to scry 1. That is a very underrated ability. If you're playing only 2 colors or less, I would suggest throwing in Zhalfirin Void for sure. Just enters untapped and scries 1. Not a bad deal. We also have Hall of Heliod's Generosity to get Guilty Conscience back from the graveyard if it happens to end up there. Emergent Zone, so we can pull off the combo at instant speed. Ruins of Trocaire is a land that enters tapped. You can tap it for a white, or you can tap it and sacrifice it to add 2 white to your mana pool. So this is our version of land ramp for white. It's not bad. Actually, a lot of competitive players play lands like this, so that's why I ended up doing it. Dwarven Ruins is the exact same thing, but for red. Remote Farm is a little different. It enters with 2 depletion counters on it, and you can tap it and remove a depletion counter from it to add 2 white, and if there are no depletion counters on it, then sacrifice remote farm. So this will only work twice, but both of those times it's adding 2 white mana to your mana pool. And in total we have 34 lands in the deck, which is kind of high for competitive Magic, so we don't mind sacrificing 1 or 2 lands. On to our tutors. What's going to help us find our combo pieces? So we have Imperial Recruiter, 2 and a red for a 1/1 human advisor. When it enters the battlefield, you search for a creature with power 2 or less and put it into your hand. So that could be combo piece creatures here, or it could also be Heliod's Pilgrim, which is 2 and a white for a 1/2. Enters the battlefield, you get to search for an aura and put it into your hand. And that aura is, of course, going to be Guilty Conscience, our combo piece. Recruiter of the Guard is 2 and a white for a human soldier. When it enters the battlefield, you get to search your library for a creature with toughness 2 or less, reveal it and put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. We got Idyllic Tutor, which is 2 and a white. Search your library for any enchantment and put it into your hand. Open the Armory, 1 and a white. Search your library for an aura or equipment and put it into your hand. We also have 2 important equipment in the deck. Enlightened Tutor, search for any artifact or any enchantment and put it into your on top of your deck, actually. But what's great is that this is instant speed, so you always wait till the opponent's end step before your own turn to cast this. Gamble, yeah, even in competitive Magic they use Gamble because we don't have many tutors in red and white. This is our only tutor that doesn't make us reveal, but unfortunately makes us discard a card at random. So what I'll usually do with Gamble is I'll tutor for another tutor. And that way I know the card that I actually want is still in my deck. So I'm not going to actually tutor for Guilty Conscience when I have Gamble. I'm going to be tutoring for Heliod's Pilgrim. And that way, if I discard Heliod's Pilgrim, I know Guilty Conscience is still somewhere in the deck. Anyway, that's something you can do if you want. And our last kind of tutor is Sunforger. It's an equipment for 3 mana. It's 3 to equip. Equipped creature gets +4/+0. And for 1 red and 1 white, you can unattach it to search your library for a red or white instant card with converted mana cost 4 or less and cast it without paying its mana cost, and then shuffle your library. So Sunforger can get us tutors, it can get us removal, and it can get us control spells. Unfortunately, it only gets instants, so it can't get us Gamble. And therefore, the only tutor it can really get us that matters is Enlightened Tutor. So Sunforger can get us Enlightened Tutor. It can also get us all kinds of other very important pieces. So as we go through the remaining spells, I'll just point out, oh, here's something Sunforger can often get. So starting with Chance for Glory. 1 a red and a white for an instant. Creatures you control gain indestructible. Take an extra turn after this one. At the beginning of that turn's end step, you lose the game. So this is a card you can obviously get with Sunforger. It also works really great with the combo because it does 2 for 1. It kind of gives your creatures haste and indestructible. Not exactly haste, but giving you that extra turn allows them to attack and gives you the combo. Also, sometimes you're just, you don't have enough mana to pull the combo off all the way because Avacyn's a little expensive. So you got enough mana to cast your, Spiteful Sliver maybe and your Guilty Conscience, but you don't have enough mana to also cast Avacyn. So then you just cast Chance for Glory, take an extra turn, and you don't even need Avacyn, actually, because now your creatures are indestructible. So excellent card for this deck. Nahiri's Machinations is 1 and a white for an enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature gains indestructible until end of turn. And you can also pay 1 and a red to have it deal 1 damage to target blocking creature. So this can actually be used to activate our combo if we have some other way to give our creatures indestructible, which we always do because our commander gives our creatures indestructible. So this can help trigger our combo by dealing that 1 damage to one of our blocking creatures and somehow doing the combo like that. But that's pretty rare. That's actually never happened. I've never done that, but I'm just saying it could. This is obviously in the deck to give our creature indestructible. Just for 2 mana, we have guaranteed the indestructibility once a turn as long as no one blows this up. And this is usually not on anyone's radar. People look at this and they're just like, yeah, whatever. Give one of your creatures indestructible a turn. Whoop-de-doo. Next we have Boros Charm, 1 red and 1 white for an instant, and you choose 1 out of 3 options. You either deal 4 damage to target player or planeswalker, permanents you control gain indestructible until end of turn, or target creature gains double strike until end of turn. So most importantly in here is the permanents you control gain indestructible. All permanents, lands, and everything. So that helps with the combo. Obviously, if you have this in your hand, 2 mana is much cheaper than the 5 mana it is to cast Avacyn. But also very often you're using these other modes. 4 damage to target player is sometimes just enough to kill someone off. Giving a creature double strike is very helpful. Often we're killing people with commander damage with Avacyn. You know, if we have Avacyn equipped with Sunforger, she's got like 8 power all of a sudden, you know, and so that's a kill in just a few turns. So that's happened before. Next we got to Fairies Protection. It's 2 and a white for an instant until your next turn. Your life total can't change and you gain protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out. So while they're phased out, they're treated as though they don't exist, even though they actually do. And they phase in before you untap during your untap step, and you unfortunately have to exile to Fairies Protection. So this will save you from literally anything except for maybe someone playing something that just says they win the game. You know, if something plays something that says they win the game, it won't matter if you're phased out and you have protection from everything. But other than that, which is pretty rare, yeah, this saves you from combat damage. This saves all your permanents. Not a bad card at all, obviously. Next, we got Grand Abolisher, 2 white for a 2/2 human cleric. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. This just says you can't do anything during my turn. You can't counter any of my combo at all. They can't interact with your combo whatsoever. Great card, a little pricey. Also forgot to mention that Teferi's Protection and Boros Charm, obviously cards you can get out with Sunforger. Next we have Abeyance, another card you can get with Sunforger. 1 and a white for an instant until end of turn. Target player can't cast instant or sorcery spells, and that player can't activate abilities that aren't mana abilities, and you draw a card. So often, even if they can't cast spells, like even if you silence them, they can still activate an ability and kill your creature. Like with Brea, the Ethereum Shaper, I've had her use her activated ability and kill Boros Reckoner before. So yeah, all the time activated abilities can actually interfere with the combo, so cards like Abeyance are great. It only works on 1 opponent, unfortunately, but you usually know who you have to worry about, right? You can usually see who has the activated abilities or who has the open mana. Next we have Silence. Oh yeah, and it draws you a card. Super sweet. Next we have Silence, 1 white for an instant. Your opponents can't cast spells this turn, so you either stop them from comboing off, or you play this during your turn when you're about to combo off. Orym's Chant, 1 white for an instant. Target player can't cast spells this turn, and you can kick it for 1 more white. So if you pay 2 white total, creatures also can't attack this turn. So it's both a fog and a silence in 1 card. This is one of the most awesome cards in white ever printed, honestly. You need to get one if you're playing a white deck. Orym's Chant, it's excellent. Yeah, also something you can get with Sunforger. And the kicker is something that you can still do with Sunforger out. And by the way, if you have a card called Isochron Scepter, you know, and Unwinding Clock, you can just use this and just stop every opponent from playing the game. But we're not doing that. Next we have Ceasefire, 2 and a white for an instant. Target player can't cast creature spells this turn, and you draw a card. So why is this in the deck? Creature spells are so, you know, narrow and niche. Well, you know, we are playing competitive Commander, and what's one of the most common win conditions for CEDH? It's Thassa's Oracle. That's right. So this is in here to kill the Thassa's Oracle player. You know, they play that card that just exiles their entire library, and then we respond with this. So then they can't cast Thassa's Oracle. You know, Thassa's Oracle doesn't have flash, and then they just lose the game on their next upkeep when they go to draw a card. So yeah, at the best, it does that. At the least, it stops them for one turn, and hopefully someone else will find an answer. Maybe we'll find an answer. So ceasefire, pretty sweet. And you can definitely tell when someone's about to go off with creatures. You know, they got that Zendikar Resurgent, you know, they got their Beast Whisperer, and they're just casting creature after creature. I mean, this is going to totally stop those decks, right? They're out there all the time. Pyroblast, 1 red for an instant. Choose one. Counter target spell if it's blue, or destroy target permanent if it's blue. Red Elemental Blast, same exact thing. So yeah, blue is the color that we are worried about disrupting our combo the most. So we have both Pyroblast, Red Elemental Blast, and we got Burnout. 1 and a red for an instant, counter target instant spell if it's blue, and draw a card at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. Gotcha is the flavor text. So Burnout, yeah, it's both a counterspell and draws us a card. Only works on blue instant spells. Really helpful though for Cyclonic Rift. Deflecting Swat, 2 and a red for an instant. If you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. And you may choose new targets for target spell or ability. So this can actually change the targets of Planeswalker abilities. I actually just used this to win a game when someone was playing the Teferi Chain Veil combo. And what I did was I responded to their Teferi trigger going on the stack, or their Teferi activated ability going on the stack, where they were going to untap the Chain Veil, and so I used Deflecting Swat to make them untap all of my stuff instead, and that ended their combo and gave me just enough time to kill them with commander damage. Anyway, also, it should be said that this is also a counter spell for counter spells. If someone's trying to counter spell one of your spells, you can use this to change the target of their counter spell to Deflecting Swat, which is going to resolve off of the stack first, and then their counter spell is going to be completely nullified. So yeah, that's also one of the main reasons people play these types of spells. And it's free with your commander. We have Vidalcan Orrery, which is 4 mana for an artifact. You may cast spells as though they had flash. So just being able to control the stack like that is really helpful with any combo deck. Next, we have our removal, starting with Path to Exile, 1 white for an instant. Exile target creature. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle their library. We have Swords to Plowshares. Exile target creature. Its controller gains life equal to its power. We have a Braid, 1 and a red. Choose one, either 3 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. The 3 damage to target creature can destroy a lot of creatures. I mean, I'd say about 60%, maybe more, of creatures die to this thing. It's great. I like it. Forsake the Worldly, exile target artifact or enchantment for 2 and a white. It's an instant, and it has cycling for 2. So that's the main reason this card is in here over a lot of other choices that exile multiple things for almost the same amount of mana. The reason this is in here is for cycling, right? Just if we don't need it, we can get rid of it and draw something else. So that's pretty excellent. And we got Chaos Warp, 2 and a red for an instant. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into their library, then reveals the top card of their library. If it's a permanent card, they put it onto the battlefield. All these previous 5 cards, they're all things you can get with Sunforger, because they're all instants that are CMC 4 or less. Also, same thing with Deflecting Swat, Red Elemental Blast, Burnout, Pyroblast, Ceasefire, you know, like all of these instants. You can get them all with Sunforger. Very sweet card. All right, on to the mass board wipe stuff. We got Austere Command, 4 and 2 white for a sorcery. Choose 2. You either destroy all artifacts, enchantments, creatures CMC 3 or less, or creatures CMC 4 or greater. So nice to have options for sure. Blasphemous Act, 8 and a red for a sorcery. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield, and it deals 13 damage for each creature. So this is the classic thing to do with Boros Reckoner and Spite Mare. And yeah, I guess you could do it now with Brash Taunter, and you can do it with Spiteful Sliver. So if you happen to have like a whole menagerie of these guys on the battlefield and you cast Blasphemous Act, that's going to be a ton of damage to a target opponent. But in Commander, that's not a way to exactly win the game. You know, I mean, but I mean, of course, we're going to throw it in the deck, of course, because number one, this is just a fabulous board wipe in any deck with red. I mean, this is very often just 1 mana, kill every creature on the battlefield. You know, if you're not playing Blasphemous Act, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Try this card out. It's amazing. Settle the Wreckage. 2 and 2 white for an instant. Exile all attacking creatures target player controls. That player may search their library for that many basic land cards, put those cards on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle their library. So this is another one we can get with Sunforger, and it is one that very easily stops our opponent from winning the game if they have something like Craterhoof Behemoth, right? They're just overrunning the board. This says, no, you don't. Next, we have Ugin the Spirit Dragon, 8 mana for a Planeswalker that enters with 7 loyalty. You can +2, have it deal 3 damage to any target. -X, exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less. That's 1 or more colors. And -10, you gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, then put up to 7 permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So Ugin the Spirit Dragon, mostly in here, obviously, for that -X, right? Just when we need it. It is a fabulous board wipe that just exiles everything we need it to. But, you know, who knows? Very often you play this and you get to that -10 ability and you draw 7 cards. And that is pretty excellent. We do only have 1 Planeswalker in the deck because we are also running the Immortal Sun, which is 6 mana for a legendary artifact. It says players can't activate Planeswalker loyalty abilities. At the beginning of your draw step, draw an extra card. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and creatures you control get +1/+1. So why do we run this and we also have a Planeswalker in the deck? Well, the odds that we're going to have both of them out at the same time are pretty slim. And if we have just one of them out, we're already ahead. We have no need to have both of them out. That is another thing. And the final reason is because the Immortal Sun, unfortunately, it just doesn't last. If somebody has any form of artifact removal, they blow this thing up, right? Like, this is the first to go out of almost anything, because it just gives you too much. It is just too good. It's worth it. It's worth it for the 6 mana to get all of these abilities. I mean, it's great. But it's also makes it such a big target, it's really hard to keep around for more than a couple of turns. Oh, I also have some more lands here that didn't come up. I moved them over here on accident. We have Handwear Battlements. We don't have the Handwear Garrison, so this is just in here as another land that gives our creatures haste, which is very useful. We have Makokoro, Center of the Sea, a legendary land, taps for colorless, or you can pay 2 and tap it, and each player draws a card. So this is just a cheap way to draw cards, and if it means all of our opponents get to draw a card too, you know, that's what we got to do, because we're playing Boros, and that's the best we can get. And it's on a land, so there's nothing. We have nothing to lose by playing these lands in our deck. Gaia Reach Sanitarium, legendary land, taps for colorless, or you can pay 2 and tap it, and each player draws a card and then discards a card. So if anyone doesn't have any cards in their hand, that means they're not going to end up with anything, but very useful for us to just loot through our deck. We have Howling Mine, 2 mana for an artifact. At the beginning of each player's draw step, if Howling Mine is untapped, that player draws an additional card. Yes, this is also card draw for our opponents, but even in blue and even in black, I mean, how many cards are there that are out there that are just 2 mana, draw an extra card every single turn? Like, none. I mean, there's like Argyl's Bloodfast, something like that. And even then, you got to pay more mana to activate that. I mean, there is nothing like Howling Mine out there. And the other thing is, in Commander, let's just face it, this makes the game so much more fun to play. Right? It gives everyone just a little bit more of a boost, but it's equal. You get it too, right? So if you play this out on turn 2, everyone's going to love you. They're going to be having just a little bit more fun. And I think that's just so important, even in competitive Magic, especially online. People fold all the time. They just quit, right? They get a hand they don't like. They're like, quit, go to the next game. Mulligan until I get the perfect hand. I don't know what it is, but people fold online all the time. They get really salty when you board wipe, right, or you tutor. There's a myriad of reasons people get salty online. So if I can give them any reason to stay in the game, I'm going to do it. And this is also giving us the advantage
I would suggest trying this out. I was really skeptical about this card for the longest time. Like, I would always like be like, oh, maybe I'll put it in my deck, and I'm like, no, I'll just do something else, right? And I would never put it in a deck. And like the moment I put this in a deck, it was so amazing. Like, it's just 2 mana, draw an extra card every turn. Like, let's do it. Let's make this game fun. Sensei's Divining Top, 1 mana for an artifact. You pay 1 to look at the top 3 cards of your library, put them back in any order, or you can tap it to draw a card and then put Sensei's Divining Top on top of your library. So this is just for reorganizing the top cards of your library, trying to dig for the exact card that you want. Essential card for any Boros deck, really, because we don't have much solid card draw, so we might as well have card fixing. Faithless Looting, 1 red for a sorcery. You draw 2, then discard 2, and it has flashback for 3. Sword of Fire and Ice, 3 mana for an equipment with equip 2. The equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from red and blue. And whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, Sword of Fire and Ice deals 2 damage to any target, and you draw a card. So this actually used to be Staff of Nin in the deck. Staff of Nin, which is 6 mana, draw an extra card at the beginning of every turn, and it deals 1 damage to any target. And the reason Staff of Nin was in the deck is because it draws us an extra card, but it also sets off the combo, right? We don't need our creature to have haste if we just use Staff of Nin to ping it for 1 damage to set off the infinite loop. So I was looking for something that does the same thing of Staff of Nin, and this is perfect. It draws us an extra card, and it sets off the combo by dealing 2 damage to any target. Now, yes, we do need to have a creature on the battlefield that's attacking, that's connecting to the opponent, but compared with Staff of Nin, I think I'm going to take this any day. Next, we have Runehorn Hellkite, 5 and a red for a 5/5 dragon with flying, and you can pay 5 and a red to exile it from your graveyard, and each player discards their hand and then draws 7 cards. So I had never heard of this until a few days ago, and I just saw someone else playing it online. I'm like, any type of wheel I can get, I'm going to take. And this works from the graveyard, and that's fabulous. So it's really hard for your opponents to interact with. Heartwarming Redemption, 2, a red and a white for an instant. Discard all the cards in your hand, then draw that many cards +1. You gain life equal to the number of cards in your hand. Not bad. Also an instant we can get with Sunforger if we really needed cards. Magus of the Wheel, 2 and a red for a human wizard. That's a 3/3, and you can pay 1 and a red and tap it and sacrifice it to have each player discard their hand and then draw 7 new cards. Reforge the Soul, 3 and 2 red for a sorcery. Each player discards their hand and then draws 7 cards, or if it happens to be the very first card you drew for the turn, you can immediately cast it for just 2 mana. That's the miracle cost. So we also have Wheel of Fortune, the classic, just 2 and a red. Each player discards their hand, then draws 7 cards. So if you don't know about wheels, these are fabulous. These get you, these dig through your deck, find your combo pieces. Sometimes you have cards you don't want to discard, but man, most often it's worth it to draw 7 new cards, but especially when you have 0 cards in your hand. All right, and that brings us to the ramp, our last section here. So we talked about the Immortal Sun. We have Mana Geyser, 3 and 2 red for a sorcery. Add 1 red for each tapped lands your opponents control. So this, man, I've seen this make 40, 50 mana easily. Like no problem. This makes a ton of mana. I mean, if you're just paying 5 to get 10 mana, that's a fabulous deal. That's a great deal. And how often do you see an opponent that's just got tons of tapped lands? I tell you, next game you play, just take a look at, turn 5. How many tapped lands do your opponents control? And how much mana would you get from Mana Geyser? You're going to be surprised. This thing will get you a ton of mana. And that's just really great for our combo, right? In one turn, we need a ton of mana to be able to do all of our things to make sure our combo goes off. Because sometimes it's very often not just our combo that we're doing. Sometimes we're having to tutor also to get the combo. We're having to tutor. We're having to pay mana to activate Hanweir Battlements, right? To make sure our creature has haste. We're having to pay mana for Avacyn. We're having to pay mana for the creature we're casting. We're having to pay the mana for Guilty Conscience. So, having a ton of mana, very important in this deck. And I should also say, if you get a chance to search for mana in this deck, you usually want to search for planes. Most of the combo pieces in this deck require white mana. Avacyn herself requires 2 white mana. So something very important to keep in mind. When you have the choice, if you already have 1 or 2 red, start getting white. All right, very important. Next we have Smothering Tithe, 3 and a white for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, that player may pay 2. If they don't, you get a treasure token. So this is, of course, infamous with wheels, right? If we wheel and then each opponent draws 7 cards, I mean, oh boy, we're going to be making 21 treasures, right? And that's just fabulous. And we just got 7 new cards. So we got 7 brand new cards. We got a full hand. And suddenly we have 21 mana. I mean, that can very often be really game ending. You also see other decks just break that to the max. They either have Smothering Tithe or Waste Not or both. And they're just wheel, and oh my god, things just get crazy and you just fold. Anyway, moving on. We have Oath of Lieges, 1 and a white for an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player chooses target player who controls more lands than they do and is their opponent. The first player may search their library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle their library. So basically, this is sort of a better land tax that's symmetrical. So it's better than land tax in that it puts the land on the battlefield, right? Land tax puts it into your hand. But this also works for every opponent, which is not so bad. Considering we're in Commander, it's a competitive game. You know, everyone who has the least amount of lands very easily could be ganging up on the person who has the most amount of lands, right? And the more that they use this, the more likely it is that you can use it, right? The more that your opponents are using Oath of Lieges, the more likely it's going to be that they have more land than you in your upkeep, and you're going to be able to ramp again, right? So this is just a really great card that I never see anybody play. Knight of the White Orchid is 2 white for a 2/2 human knight with first strike. When it enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you may search your library for a plains card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. Dockside Extortionist is 1 and a red for a 1/2 Goblin Pirate. When it enters the battlefield, create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. This is 100% the most important card in the deck. This can get you so much mana for just 2, right? As they say, it's the ultimate ritual, right? For just 2 mana, you can get easily 5, 10, 20 treasure tokens off of this. I mean, this guy's insane. In our deck, it only kind of really works once. We don't have many ways to like recur it or anything like that. But just as a one shot, this can give us all the mana we need to get our combo going. Very often, I'm searching for Dockside Extortionist with Recruiter of the Guard and Imperial Recruiter. Next, we have Borosignet, 2 mana for an artifact. And it says you can pay 1 and tap it to add red and white to your mana pool. So mana fixing. Don't get confused. This doesn't add 2 mana to your mana pool. You have to pay 1 to activate it. But it fixes your mana. Talisman of Conviction is 2 mana for an artifact. You can tap it to add colorless to your mana pool, or you can tap it to add red or white, and it deals 1 damage to you. We don't have the new signet, the new commander signet, Arcane Signet. I just haven't gotten around to buying that yet. I don't think it's completely necessary, though. I mean, it's a great card. I would love to have Arcane Signet. It's just like another $10. There's a few cards from this deck we're missing. One of them is Arcane Signet. The other one is, the Cavern of Souls, right? Obviously, because that's $20, right? But we don't need it. And there's like one other Mox I'm missing, but honestly, I think we're fine without all that. We're still good without that. We have Everflowing Chalice, 0 mana for an artifact with multi-kicker 2. So as it enters the battlefield, it enters with a charge counter for each time it was kicked, and you tap it to add colorless for each charge counter on it. So this is great early game, and it's great late game. It's actually a really great card that for any deck with lots of ramp. Oh my gosh, Everflowing Chalice. This another card that I used to underestimate, honestly. That I used to think, it's not so good. It's like, it's not as good as Soul Ring, whatever. I mean, oh my gosh, this card is good. This card is really good. Like when you got nothing else to do, or especially early game when you've ramped with a bunch of other stuff, and then you end it all with the Everflowing Chalice. I mean, that's great. Really great card. We have land tax, 1 white for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls more lands than you may search your library for up to 3 basic lands, reveal them and put them into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So I will actually very often search for this with Enlightened Tutor or Idyllic Tutor, because early in the game, it's just so important to make sure we're hitting our land drops every single turn. Technically, not ramp, but I mean, in Commander, you're almost always going to get to a point where you're missing land drops. So it kind of is equivalent to ramp in just the fact that you're going to be getting a land every single turn, and normally you don't, right? Normally in Commander, especially in competitive Commander, you do not hit every single one of your land drops. Absolutely. You run out of land drops in no time. And the other way to think about this is it's really drawing you 3 extra cards a turn, right? Putting 3 extra cards into your hand a turn. Those 3 cards are land, but that means you're that much less likely to draw a land as your next draw. So even though this fills up your hand kind of way too much, and you always end up having to discard lands, it's worth it to just use it every single time until you're completely out of basics in your deck. Next we have Soul Ring, of course. Mana Vault, 1 mana for an artifact. It doesn't untap during your untap step. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 4 if you do untap it. And at the beginning of your draw step, if it's tapped, it deals 1 damage to you. And the most important thing, it taps to add 3 colorless mana to your mana pool. Now I know what you're gonna say, oh my gosh, this card's so expensive. And it is. You know, in paper, these cards are like, you know, they're worth hundreds of dollars depending on what print you're getting. But yeah, Mana Vault, Mana Crypt, Mox Opal, Mox Diamond, you know, these are 4 cards that are very expensive in paper. Thankfully online, you can get them pretty cheap. And, you know, like I said, we're playing competitive today. So what can you do? If you're playing competitive and you're not running these cards, I'm sorry, you don't stand a chance. Like, you have to have 0 to 1 mana ramp. So we have Mana Vault. We have Mox Diamond, 0 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you have to discard a land, but it taps to add 1 mana of any color. Mox Opal, 0 mana. Taps to add 1 mana of any color, but you can only do it if you have 3 or more artifacts, which we have a lot of artifacts in the deck. And Mana Crypt, 0 mana, taps to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. At the beginning of your upkeep, you flip a coin. If you lose the flip, it deals 3 damage to you. So this only deals 3 damage to you 50% of the time, and in a format where you start with 40 life, you do not care at all. But that being said, I still don't always play this right away. Like, lots of people throw this down turn 1, like, every single time. I'll only throw this down as soon as I can start using it. You know, if I have no reason to use it, I have no reason to put it down and risk taking 3 damage. But anyway, if you look at our ramp here, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 ramp spells that are all 2 mana or less. 12 that I'm able to play on turn 1 or 2. So that just goes to show, on turn 1 or 2, we want to be ramping. You know, we want to be ramping as soon as possible. And then our other 3 ramp spells are much more expensive. But, I mean, they also add a ton of mana to our mana pool, and Immortal Sun just does a ton for the deck. So that's the deck. That's Archangel, Avacyn, Helix combo. Let me know what you think, and be sure to stay tuned for the gameplay.